So, you want to own a high-end art gallery. A painting that cost $40 in paint and canvas just sold for $4 million. You are about to find out why that is not the strange part. Picture the gallery you are imagining right now. White walls, polished concrete. One canvas under a spotlight, priced higher than most people's homes. A woman in black hands you wine you did not order and never once looks at the price tag. That is the postcard. Here is what is actually happening behind it. Some galleries in that exact scene are quietly clearing tens of millions of dollars a year. Others on the same block with the same white walls, the same wine, the same famous names on the roster are closed within 18 months. Same glamour, same tier, opposite outcome. By the end of this, you will know exactly why, and you will never look at an art fair the same way again. Here is the part almost nobody tells you before you buy in. You are not selling paint on canvas. Paint and canvas cost almost nothing. What you are actually selling is scarcity, provenance, and belief. Three things that exist nowhere except inside other people's heads. A painting is worth exactly what the last confirmed sale says it is worth, and not a cent more, until someone convinces a room full of wealthy people otherwise. That is why this entire industry spends more energy managing perception than it spends on framing. Which museums are collecting which artists? Which fairs are showing which names? Which collectors are seen buying what? All of it is scaffolding, built to hold up a price that has no floor underneath it except confidence. Start with the gallery itself. A top-tier gallery is not in the business of selling paintings to strangers who wander in off the street. It is in the business of representation. It signs exclusive deals with a small roster, usually 10 to 30 artists, and agrees to build their careers in exchange for a cut of everything they ever sell, for as long as the relationship holds. The standard split is 50-50 on new work sold out of the studio. That sounds enormous, until you see what it is actually paying for. Rent on a flagship space in a major art district can run into the high six figures a year, sometimes 7, just for the ceiling height and the light collectors expect. Add a director, sales associates working partially on commission, a registrar tracking every object's location and condition, a preparator team installing every show, and a publicist whose entire job is getting the right critic in the room on opening night. And payroll alone can eat a third of gross revenue before a single canvas sells. Now here's the part that breaks most people's mental model of this business completely. A gallery does not need to sell much to survive, because the money is never spread evenly. It is concentrated in a handful of enormous sales. One painting from a hot mid-career artist can move for a few $100,000, and a gallery might only need to place a handful of those a year to cover the entire operation. This is a business of extreme concentration. A tiny fraction of the roster carries the whole gallery, and everyone else on the wall exists partly to build its reputation as a place doing serious work. Less retail shop, more talent agency, betting on a small number of careers, and living or dying by whether they keep climbing. And here is where it gets genuinely strange. The single most valuable thing a gallery owns is not inventory. Most top galleries barely hold any. It is the waiting list. When a young artist starts generating real demand, the gallery does not sell to the highest bidder. It sells to a museum first, often at a modest price, because a museum acquisition stamps that artist with institutional legitimacy and raises every other price on their work overnight. Then it sells to a short list of trusted collectors, sometimes well below what the open market would pay, because a collector known for buying wisely and holding long-term lends credibility to the trajectory, and might lend the work to a museum retrospective years later, raising the price again. The gallery is not maximizing any one sale. It is managing a decades-long price curve. A greedy sale to an unknown flipper can crash that curve permanently. If the piece resurfaces at auction 18 months later for less than it originally sold, the market reads that as a red flag on the entire artist. Now, step into the auction house, which runs on a completely different, far more mechanical model. An auction house does not represent artists. It represents sellers for a single transaction, and it charges both sides of the deal. The seller pays a commission, negotiated case by case, sometimes waived entirely, because a house that badly wants a famous painting for its evening sale will cut its own fee to zero just to land the piece and the publicity that comes with it. The buyer pays a buyer's premium on top of the hammer price, a percentage that shrinks as the price climbs but is still enormous in dollar terms. On a $10 million hammer, that premium alone can add well over $1 million more, straight to the house, regardless of what the seller walks away with. Multiply that across 80 or 100 lots in a single evening sale, and that premium, not the seller's commission, is where an auction house makes the bulk of its actual profit. The real engineering happens before the gavel even goes up, in a device most people in the room never fully understand: the guarantee. To convince a nervous seller to consign a masterpiece instead of selling privately, a house will sometimes promise a minimum price no matter what happens on the night, a guarantee that can run into the tens of millions. If the piece falls short at auction, the house is contractually on the hook to pay the difference itself. To offload that risk, houses bring in a third-party guarantor, often another collector or an investment fund, who agrees to buy the piece at the guaranteed price if bidding falls short, in exchange for a fee, and who also gets to keep bidding beyond that price if they actually want the piece. What looks like spontaneous, electric bidding in the room is frequently a choreography with a guaranteed floor locked in place before anyone lifts a paddle. The auctioneer knows exactly where that floor sits the entire time, which leads to the part collectors rarely say out loud. Not every bid in the room is real. Auctioneers are legally permitted, within limits, to take bids off the chandelier, acknowledging bids that do not exist, purely to carry the price up toward a reserve the seller set privately. Houses insist it is tightly bounded, but its legal existence tells you something honest about what this business actually is. The rapid-fire calling, the tension, the applause when the gavel drops, that theater is not incidental. It is the product. A quiet, business-like transaction does not make headlines the next morning, and headlines are what convince the next seller to consign their masterpiece to that house instead of a rival. Before any of that theater happens, though, someone has to prove the thing is even real. Before an 8-figure painting goes anywhere near a sale, it passes through authentication, provenance research tracing every owner back to the studio, sometimes forensic testing of the paint and canvas to confirm the dating. On a major work, that process alone can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it still is not foolproof. A painting with a gap in its ownership history, even an innocent one, caused by nothing more than a private sale decades ago that was never publicly recorded, can lose real value simply because the paper trail looks incomplete. In this business, the object and the story of the object are treated as the same asset. Damage one, and you have damaged both. And once a painting clears all of that, here is the twist. It often disappears completely. Museum-grade works travel in climate-controlled crates on chartered routes, insured for their full value the entire way, and once they land, many are never displayed at all. They go straight into a free port, a tax-advantaged warehouse sitting in customs limbo, where art, wine, and other high-value goods can be stored indefinitely, without triggering the import taxes or capital gains that would apply if the piece actually crossed into the country and changed hands there. Entire fortunes in painting sit inside these buildings right now, insured, climate-controlled, and seen by no one, functioning less like cultural objects and more like gold bars that happen to be beautiful. Meanwhile, galleries are spending a shocking share of their annual budget just to stay relevant. A single booth at a major international art fair can cost well into 6 figures once you add the booth fee, international shipping, insurance, staff travel, and a build-out worthy of the artists inside it. Galleries attend anyway, often losing money on the fair itself, because a fair is where next year's 6-figure private sales actually get built, over a handful of intense days, surrounded by exactly the collectors a gallery can't otherwise reach. So let's put real numbers on it. A respected gallery representing 20 artists might do $15 million in sales in a strong year. Half of that goes straight to the artists under the standard split. Of the remaining $7.5 million, rent, payroll, fair participation, shipping, insurance, and marketing eat the majority, and after one genuinely rough year, with a few artists between major bodies of work, the operating margin can shrink to almost nothing. Compare that to a major auction house running several evening sales a year, moving over $1 billion in art annually, and keeping somewhere around 15 to 20% of that total between buyers' premiums and sellers' fees. Far more predictable. It isn't betting on one artist's career, it's taking a toll on the entire market, up or down, as long as objects keep changing hands. The owners who actually last in this business long-term are rarely the ones with the best eye for talent. They are the ones who figured out early that a gallery and an auction house are not selling paintings at all. They are selling scarcity, timing, and trust. Three things that can be manufactured, managed, and occasionally manipulated far more reliably than anyone's taste in art ever could be. So here's the question worth sitting with. Every waiting list a collector begs to get on, every hammer that drops to applause, every confirmed bid from somewhere in the back of the room, if the price only exists because enough people agree to believe it, is that a market or is that a performance with better lighting? Tell me where you land in the comments.